Okay. I'm Claire. I'm the founder of Ladies Get Paid. We are an educational platform that helps women advance professionally, financially. We want to see women have power in all of the ways that they define it. And we do that through webinars and our Slack group with over 75,000 women all over the world. So if you're not part of it, it's free. So you have to be a part of it. No excuses. Ladiesgetpaid.com, and we'll go ahead and add you to our Slack group. I love our guest. She's very generous with her time because she's done events with us before. So welcome back, Akilah. I'm going to read her bio just for a minute here. So Akilah has 15 plus years in managing and building successful projects, teams, and leaders. She has worked on various multi-million-dollar projects, that is million, and is the founder of Change Cadet, an Oakland-based organizational development consulting firm specializing in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. You caught that acronym. Good for you. It's DEIB. Dr. Cadet holds a Bachelor of Science in Health Education in Community-Based Public Health, a Master of Public Health, and a Doctor of Health Sciences in Leadership and Organizational Behavior. Okay. Her bio is longer than that, but we want to ask her some questions. The last thing is she was my sensitivity editor, which is a new thing that books are starting to do, or at least they should start to do, writers should start to do, which is she made sure that I was not a myopic white lady and that I was really thinking bigger than me as I told the stories and gave advice in Ladies Get Paid. So part of the questions we're going to ask Akilah is, how did I do? And what that experience was like. Akilah, welcome. Were you always this person? I mean, I know the story, the origin story of your consulting firm, but did you associate with this kind of work when you were growing up or when you were in undergrad?
Yeah, I've always been someone who's advocating for self first and for others. It really all started when I was a Girl Scout. Maybe it did. I started when I was in kindergarten, but I come from an activist mother, so it's always been part of me. And I come from, my father I'm a first-gen kid, so he came here not knowing the language, and figuring it out and becoming a lawyer and later retiring as a diplomat. So I come from parents who have always been advocating for their communities, themselves, and others. So it's only natural that I do this. And as I look back in my career before having my company for 6 years this month, I was always advocating for other people. People were coming to me for advice. I was putting myself in risking my career for myself and for others. So I now finally just get paid for that work.
Do you ever struggle with your rates? I realized that was... Yeah, in figuring out how to price yourself. And also, have you raised your rates as companies? I don't know if they're now realizing they should have, they should focus on inclusion, or maybe they're just afraid of being shamed. We can talk a little bit about that. But have you increased your rates at all?
Yeah, because money. It's definitely important. We're here talking about Ladies Get Paid. So of course, my rates have gone up. Anyone who has a business, as demand goes up, your rates go up. That's just how you do it. But coming from the public health world and initially figuring out what my consulting rates were it was incredibly challenging, because it was just we lived off of potlucks and helping people. And so I still help people. I still do public health work. I'm still, educating, but I had to have a hard talk of my worth and my value, my degrees, my expertise. And then this is emotionally heavy work to do, and making sure I'm compensated fairly to buy the shoes or the ring, or when COVID's over, the travel, but more importantly, be able to sustain this business, right? And my team. I'm not afraid to ask other people for, rates and pricing when I first started, but now my COO and I, we are always constantly reevaluating and staying above the demand.
Mm-hmm. When you, so when you, let's say you get hired, so assuming they've reached out to you, okay, they understand that they need to do this. What's the first step that you take with them?
I don't take any time with them, because it's not a good use of my time. And I say that with all the respect, because there's people who will want to suck ideas from you, us, my company, for free $99, and I do not play that game at all. that it's not happening. So when people have an interest in working with the company, they may reach out to me directly, or they come through the website. I will always direct them to my COO, because she'll talk about business and what we can provide. Once there's expressed interest, then I'm happy to have a meet and greet and, figure out how to work together and come up with that personalized scope of work. But they have to value me first. If that value isn't there, I'm not going to talk to someone even for 15 minutes, because I could be doing nothing. I could be responding back to emails. You know what I mean? I could be doing other things that are more of a value add.
Lindsay, I love it. Ooh, they have to value me first. Okay, guys, tweet. And then, okay, you're at Change Cadet on Instagram.
I am.
Yes. Yeah. Everybody follow Akilah. I was going to say, it's motivational, but I think it's really more like a kick in the butt kind of motivation. So so you've been hired. How do you get an assessment of like what's really going on, right? Because like they're telling you from the corporate, from the HR, wait, but the employees, what do they actually feel? So yeah, how are you gathering information to have a really, accurate and deep sense of what's happening?
Oh, so many things. So, it's like dating, right? So when you're in your first date, you're like, best behavior, this is what I'm always this way, this is how I dress, right? And then as you get to know someone, then they're like, well, this thing or that thing, that part comes up. So a lot of my work is centered around the intuition that I have and my experience I have doing this. And so if people are painting a certain picture, it's like, okay, great. So then I know that there's these areas to potentially work on. But if I know if a company I work with only has 5 Black employees, I know that I have to talk to at least one. If I talk to one of the 5 Black employees, it's a sample size to really know what's going on, right? And how they can move forward. So there's always that shift that happens that I've actually built into my work. So even when we have a scope of work of what they're saying they need, we have a kickoff meeting where I learn more about what's happening. There's always, there's an NDA that's in there, there's contractual language where people feel comfortable. Then I reevaluate the scope of work. It's like, I know you're saying this, but in order to get to X, we have to start at C and then go to 2, little 2, then D, and then we can get to where you want to go. And so, constantly pivoting in this work, which is why change is in the title to business. Constant change, doing this work for self, others, leaders, the money coming in, the partners, the vendors. There's so many things that are constantly changing, and we need to make sure we are constantly changing to get to that end goal of being an anti-racist, workplace culture or a place of belonging.
Do you find that people want more surface? Or maybe I'll talk a little bit about what I've seen, and you can tell me if this is what you've seen also. Where people want, I don't want to say a quick fix, but let's have an ERG, right? Let's create an ERG for fill in the blank marginalized group. Well, hold on now. We got to start from where are you even recruiting and what your values are. And then, how do we, define what leadership looks like? How do we hold managers accountable for who they promote, right? I mean, it's just, it's holistic. It's holistic. So let's talk about maybe middle managers, junior employees, because I got a couple of questions, right? They're feeling overwhelmed. They're feeling like maybe they're not being listened to. Do they have any leverage here? So maybe for them, where do they begin when they see this is potentially very big? Can they affect change?
Yeah, the way they affect change is 2 primary ways. One, how you're showing up to work every day. Are you using microaggressions? Are you stereotyping your peers, those underneath you? Do you believe things have to be a certain way? Are they coming from a white supremacist view, white dominant culture view? So reflecting and reevaluating that. But the second thing is really holding their leaders, their company accountable to whatever insert we are going to be different in 2020 as the results of the murder of George Floyd, or actually, no, just kidding, we're going to be different now after the insurrection and move forward. It's important for all levels of staff, but particularly the middle managers and junior people to hold their leaders and the company accountable to what they're saying, right?
How do you hold somebody accountable?
So that email that they sent out to you saying they're going to do the final of these things, if you haven't heard an update of these things, you want to email them and say like, hey, I'm really excited about how you are showing up for me as a Black employee, or showing up for all of our BIPOC employees. But I haven't received an update. So what is going on here? How can I join this ERG? How can I join this committee? What can I do to keep this work moving forward, right? And it's a simple ask. They put it out there. So once anytime leaders put something out there, you can now hold them accountable because they're saying, we're going to do this. And then you're going to say, great, but you haven't. So what's happening? And if that answer is like, well, we're still waiting for the right diversity consultant to come in, or we are looking to hire that key, people, culture, diversity role, that's fine. But then you're going to want to circle back in 3 months. Hey, what's the update on that? And so keeping that momentum going. The job of everyone, regardless of their role, is to remember how to act. If you want to be an anti-racist organization, you have to act accordingly. Stands for accountability, communication, and transparency. Okay. And that is reciprocal all around. As a Black employee, I don't like how I do not feel supported. As a white ally in the workplace, we need to actually, like you said, Claire, really re-examine our recruitment process, right? And being clear and transparent about all of those things.
Lindsay, I'm loving you right now. You're putting it in the chat, right? Acronym. Okay. Accountability, communication, responsibility. And by the way, folks, you could keep putting questions in the chat. I'm monitoring it. All right. You said white supremacy. We've had a discussion about this before where that word it's jarring. I mean, and immediately, I feel defensive, right? It's like saying you're racist. Oh no, not me. Okay. Can we define what that means and how it gets manifested and kind of first steps for us to be able to reconcile that in ourselves before we can go to our management and say, now you need to examine yourself.
I mean, so white supremacy doesn't mean someone is necessarily a racist, white supremacist, part of KKK, insert any, white supremacist group. Saying white supremacy is talking about the truth of the matter, and that is how America was built. White supremacy is the foundation of America. There's no way around that. There's been ways around that with history and, what's happening in society and systemic oppression and all that other stuff, but there's no way around that. If we want to get to a place where we have humanity and equality for Black people, for BIPOC people, we have to talk about what the real issue is. Now, when white people hear the term white supremacy, they're like, is there another word? Is there another term? What can we do? That makes me uncomfortable. Good. I'm glad that makes you uncomfortable, but no, there aren't any other words. Those are the words to use. Within that discomfort, that's where action happens. Because I wish white people really understood this. Even with all the privilege that I have all these degrees, I have a business, I have light skin privilege, I sound a way that's comfortable for white people. I will never be white. I will never be white. So even with all my hard work and advocacy and all this other stuff, there are still people due to white supremacy that don't want to hear anything I have to say. They don't want to partner. They don't want to change action and behavior. So what this means, if you identify as white in this group, is that you have the most power for the most change. It is a gift to be part of the dominant culture. White supremacy, top, superior, supreme, part of the dominant culture with your daily actions, with your systemic actions, how you're showing up at work, your friend group, family, to really change things and move things around. Yeah, Victoria, that's a great book. And to move things around, to be in a position where we can have humanity and equality for all people. So what I will say is, if you're struggling with the term white supremacy, think about it this way. If you've ever sat in a beanbag chair, white supremacy is a beanbag chair. In there, it's comfortable. If you've heard the term white comfort, it's like, but I don't want to do anything because this is comfortable to me and I like it. And in that beanbag chair, whatever movie you want magically plays and the popcorn is given to you. But right next to you is me, and I'm sitting on the floor because I don't have that protection of the beanbag chair. I don't have the things that are handed to me or given to me. I'm always saying like, hey, can I watch the movie that I want to watch? Can someone please give me some popcorn? Right? And that comfort of white supremacy is why people will not take action to be an ally or advocate. All we are asking for, Black people, is just a beanbag chair. Help me get a beanbag chair so we all can be in beanbag chairs together. We all can deserve comfort. We all can deserve opportunity, humanity, and equality.
Loving, everybody's loving the analogy. Now I want it. I'm like, I want to.
Have you tried to get out of a beanbag chair? You're in it. It's a whole... It's a process.
We're kind of laughing about it, but that's actually, that is a really fantastic point. It is hard to get out of white supremacy.
Oh my God, yeah.
Okay, which is not an excuse. Daily action, you mentioned that. What are some actions people can take today?
So coming here, being part of this conversation, you're learning, right? People are going to talk about a beanbag chair, spread the word, you know, put it out there. That's great. It is checking your bias, right? So some of you are like, wow, she has so many degrees. How does she have so many? And why does she sound? Check that bias that's coming up, to just be present, to listen to what I have to say, or someone who looks like me, someone who's different than you. Again, that accountability part is really important. I am not going to continue this conversation with you, Grandpa, because it's hurtful and offensive, right? and shutting it down. I'm going to unfollow someone because they're spreading hate or rhetoric. And those little actions have big impact and progress. I've shared this multiple times, but unfortunately, when I do go to a cafe to get my chai latte, there are so many people who do not see me in line, white people, and they'll step right in front of me. And I'm like, I'm sorry, excuse me, you know, I was in line. Oh, I didn't see you. Do you know what it's like for someone to say, I didn't see you? Do you see how much hair I have? How much hair? And, you know, Claire has seen me in IRL. I have quite the fits. I have outfits on, you know, you can see me, but
Right.
It's someone's intention to not do that. So a small action, imagine if you were behind me or in front of me, and you could say, for me, she was in line, the line starts over there. Mm-hmm. That takes away emotional labor for me because someone else is showing up in that simple of capacity, right?
In case people don't know what emotional labor is, let me tell you all, even if you haven't heard that phrase, we're all suffering from it by the fact that we're women, though of course women of color experience it more. So maybe define what that is, and if you want to give an example of emotional mm-hmm. labor in your life, I think that's helpful.
Imagine this: you wake up, and the only safe space you have in your life is your home. As soon as I do get into my car, which is a luxury one, I am racially profiled. Is that my car? How can I afford that car? If a police officer drives next to me, then my blood pressure goes up. My heart rate goes up because I don't know if I'll be pulled over. Because you know what I can guarantee? I will be harassed at best when I get pulled over. And then when I do make it to the cafe, that example of what I just shared happens to you. And then I go to meet with a client and they're waiting for Dr. Cadet. And I have to explain to them that I'm Dr. Cadet, even though they're assuming it wouldn't be someone in the flyest sneakers around. And so once I get through that bias, then I go talk to the white CEOs of the company. Then I have to explain to them, like, yeah, no, you hired me. Remember, let's do this work together. And then I can get to a place of some type of change or action. All of that is a lot to carry. Mm-hmm. It's a lot to carry. There's a lot of weight when you're constantly advocating for yourself, constantly advocating to not fall into a bias or stereotype that's out there. That's emotional labor, mm-hmm. emotional weight. This is heavy work that I do, but it's just heavy work being a representation of intersectionality. I'm a Black woman, right? To live through those spaces. Mm-hmm. I'll give you another example. Last year, and I haven't really talked about this, I was walking my dog at 6:30 in the morning because my first meeting starts at 7 because I work around the world. So I was walking my dog. A car like reversed, which is very odd because there were no parking spots. And then I realized what I thought was a pop for an old car in front of it was actually gunfire. So I had to run for my life, and they were shooting at each other. I'm not too far from a freeway. Before anyone stereotypes me, I'm in a rich ass neighborhood intentionally because I'm a single woman. And so it was just a random fluke, and I had to run for my life and hide. It was traumatizing. But you know what I couldn't do? I couldn't call the cops because I live in Oakland, California. So if I call the cops, then my day would be ruined. I would have to go into a system that's not designed to protect me. I would have to prove what happened. I would have to see if there's cameras. It would just be me. My dog can't talk. And I would have to deal with that system. I cannot call the police. I want you to understand that. I cannot call the police at all. So I have to live in that space of trauma, hop into a 7 a.m. meeting and help companies dismantle their own systemic oppression and racism. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow. Right?
Very intense story.
Wow. I mean, so all I'm saying is like, listen, we are just asking you to show up little by little every day. We're asking you the power that you have to make change, mm-hmm. and to show up.
Mm-hmm. Sharon asked a good question. She said, what do we do about senior coworkers or managers that not only, quote, don't see BIPOCs in a work setting, but also refuse to admit that they engage in that kind of behavior, right? It's like you can't start advocating for what you want if they don't even see why they need to have this in the first place. This is real one. How do you do this?
So, I mean, it falls into the performative allyship bucket, right? The reason why a lot of some of the companies you work for are doing work in the diversity, anti-racism, belonging space, whatever it may be, is because other companies, their counterparts, are doing it. The only way this works is if your highest level of leadership is on board and invested in it. Again, that goes back to accountability and holding those individuals accountable. But it also, I just want to remind everyone, regardless of how you identify, it's important to have boundaries in this work too. You know, so if you're in a position of being tokenized, if you're the only one who's being an ally in the group, you have to decide if it's really worth it for you, because again, going back to the earlier point that Claire brought up, there's emotional labor that can go into it too. We don't want you to be, you know, completely like paralyzed and not want to do anything, but you also have to do it in a way where you can see some small changes moving forward.
Okay, this is a bit of a long, I mean, it's a specific question, but I want to give everybody some context. This was submitted. I'm a white lady, or I'm a white woman who wants to recruit more BIPOC candidates, both for our own support of dismantling a broken racist system and because our clients are asking for it. Okay, this is great. But, and I know you've gotten this question before, I'm worried I will say the wrong thing and offend or get sued if I actively network or post roles. How can we say that we are actively desirous of BIPOC candidates without being accused by lame people that we are being discriminatory or illegal? Okay. What are some things I should say or avoid when screening candidates to get them interested in a role that actively wants more BIPOC employees without them thinking she's only talking to me because I'm Black, Latinx? Can I say Black? Like, then there's also just like a language, you know, a language issue here. So maybe let's start with how transparent can and should companies be when posting roles or when networking that they really would like to fill this with a person who's not white?
Yeah, Julia's right. Having your equity statement or your drive or cause or value for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in your job description is a great way to do it. I just want to remind everyone, no one does this for white people. No one does this for white people. Do you understand what this means? And so no one's like, oh, wait, the job description that has only brought white people in for you. No one thinks about that, right? All of a sudden, when you are being intentional about saying, how can we make this workplace better? People are like, well, I don't want to make white people uncomfortable. That's what it comes down to. I don't want to be sued by a white person who feels uncomfortable. But white people hire white people all the time.
So you don't think this would make somebody, so I guess for her question, like, wouldn't make a person of color feel uncomfortable by being explicit?
So the important thing is realizing that when people want to change their culture and diversify their culture, they have to be intentional about it. If you're stopping every place to say like, well, can I say this? Can I do this? Can I do that? You're thinking of yourself. That person is thinking of the company or their self, right? Because they don't want to get in trouble. The action is, we want to make sure we have more representation of Black people or Latinx, Hispanic people or whatever, right? And that's fine. So if you want to start with the language that you have in your job description of the diversity statement of where you want to go, I think that's great. You can also have bullet points, descriptors in that job description that says we are looking for people who are open to learning and unlearning. We're looking for people who have experience with different communities. We celebrate culture. Like, you can put that in there, so it's setting that expectation and tone. And then you should be interviewing for your values that have hopefully been updated to include diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. That's in there too. And so you're asking questions that tie into baseline, whether it's a white guy or a Black woman. Are you open to learning and unlearning? What does a culture of belonging look like to you? We are on a journey of belonging, and this is what we're working for. What would you want to add to that, right? Because you're setting that expectation. But again, I have to stress this. This work is uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. And if you are really stopping to look at every single thing to assure that the most likely the person who's a leader, which is privilege, or the white person who's in power is comfortable in diversifying the workforce, that is performative allyship, that's white centering, and that's not doing what needs to be done.
And if anybody's worried that they're going to seem like an agitator or they're going to like jeopardize their relationship, just remember that you're doing this because the company will be better. I mean, of course, you're doing it because it's the right thing to do, et cetera. But the bottom line is improved when there's diversity in leadership, right? There's a better chance that they'll be able to recruit amazing candidates and retain those candidates. Like, again, this isn't like a favor or charity. You can really make the business case.
Yeah.
So just for everybody who maybe is worried about pushing back or bringing up these uncomfortable questions sometimes, this is to their benefit as well as to theirs. On the flip side, what are questions that we should be asking if we are interviewing, including, what should BIPOC women in particular look out for when trying to advance their careers? So yeah, let's say we're evaluating, is this a company I actually want to work at? How do we figure that out?
So it's looking to see if they have a public or external, statement of their diversity plan, diversity report. Quick Google to see any articles that have come up, because George Floyd was murdered on May 25th. So a lot has happened by then. So how is this company being active and how they're showing up? How are they holding themselves accountable? Also know for BIPOC, you may be a lonely or an only, to start with, or in that respective department. So are you up for, helping them through this change and transition? Unfortunately, it's a reality for a lot of BIPOC people that you will be part of that work, but again, have the clear boundaries of how much you want to contribute. And if they're looking for someone to specifically do the work, make sure it's part of your job description and you're compensated for that.
Yeah, great segue. There's a story that I tell in the book. And by the way, the book is structured in that I tell the stories of real women who are each facing a different professional challenge. And as I tell their story, I stop along the way and I give advice, almost like I'm career coaching them, and then you can eavesdrop on it. There's a woman who is able to implement a better paid family leave policy at her company. She starts a parental ERG. And then she says, not only do I want a raise, because what I've done here has improved the company culture, which again, you're using that to recruit and retain talent. I want to be compensated for it. And moving on, I would like a percentage of my responsibilities here to be dedicated to continuing to run the ERG. I'm going to give away the end of her chapter, but yes, she gets told yes. So I love that, right? If you're doing anything that helps the company, you need to use that as part of the case you make for why you should be moving forward, whether it is, a promotion or a raise, et cetera. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. This is a question about, and you spoke to it a little bit here, how can I steer clear of dumping all the diversity work on Black colleagues who might prefer to spend their capacity and strengths elsewhere? This is a little bit, I remember we talked about this at our last fireside of not putting more work on Black women, but at the same time not speaking for them, right? This balance of where, you're giving space and a microphone to somebody else, but being able to say, well, you don't have to do it if you don't want. Like there's a balance to be had. And of course, every situation, is different. Any thoughts off of this question this person asked, just kind of generally?
Yes, but can I do a quick little pivot? Because this question popped up, which I think is really important. Constance.
Okay, let me read that out loud. Do you have any advice for workplaces where the people of color employees fight amongst each other and reinforce racist views amongst each other? Okay, yes, I would love to hear.
So there's this thing that you may have heard of before called the model minority. So, and that typically will encompass Asian, South Asian, people of color, BIPOC. And there's this myth that those people of color, those BIPOC, are okay, opposed to Black or Brown or Latinx or Hispanic, right? And so there's that I just want to put out there. That can perpetuate myths within communities of color as well as white people and how they view different BIPOC. And then with every community of color, we have a few things that make things difficult. We have colorism. So colorism meaning, you can Google and do a deeper dive, but colorism meaning, again, like I said earlier, I have lighter skin privilege. I'm closer to white. White is viewed as the best, top, superior, supreme. So I have more access to things. And that can happen in family groups, community groups, and workplace groups. You can think about ERGs or, employees of color in the workspace. So that can cause divide. Then on top of it, we have Status. There's different types of status around the world. It can look like a caste system, but it can also look like status as far as where you went to school, particularly for those of you who are in fintech, finance spaces, or tech spaces that allow for a different privilege. And there could be some divisiveness that's in there. And also your tenure at that company. So if you are, you've gone through some tokenism, you've gone through some stuff, that can also create a divide. So the best advice I have, again, is allyship. What? Plot twist. So a lot of people think allyship is between Black people and white people, but allyship is so much more than that. You can be an ally. I am an ally as a Black woman to my Black community. How can I uplift, empower, advocate, support others? So you have to hold yourself accountable for that, to check your own bias that can happen in your own group. It's not racism. You can't be racist, you're a person of color, but you can have bias and you can create those stereotypes. So check them. And also, just like you would for a white person, you want to hold them accountable by calling them in, not cancel culture, not calling them out, but moving to calling in, which is calling out cancel culture. You suck too. That sucked. Can we talk about that? This is how it made me feel. A call to action, an informative part, a resource, a discussion, a dialogue, so that you can show up collectively. I'm glad you like it, Constance. So you can show up collectively as a group. And again, for not only for white people, but for BIPOC people too.
Love that. Call in, not call out. Okay. But just out of curiosity, why do you say you can't be racist?
Because we are not oppressed. I mean, we are oppressed. White people are not oppressed. So the way oppression works, it gives advantages and favors to members of a dominant group at the expense of another group through mental distress, power, and control, right? The dominant group in America, white people, they oppress the most. Oppressed people cannot oppress people. We can have bias, we can have stereotypes, but we aren't the ones creating the discrimination and the racism.
Interesting.
We don't have the power to do much about it besides show up for ourselves, celebrate ourselves, right? So I'm sure a lot of you admire Black women. Black women are strong, we're powerful. We have to be, because of intersectionality, all these other things. But as you can see, even just from the past runoffs that we had, Black women save the world, by default. When we save ourselves, we save the world. That's not what we're trying to do, but that's how much we have to advocate and so, support one another, because we are dealing with discrimination and racism from those who can oppress us.
Mm-hmm. I was going to have you go into how do you balance lifting other people up, but also not making them feel like you're putting work on them. If you want to jump in and answer that, that's fine. Otherwise, we can talk about the book process.
I mean, it's just accountability, right? When it comes down to it, I act every day, I'm transparent with things. So that's why today I'm very straightforward. This is what you can do. And if not, you're dabbling and experimenting with racism. That's the short version of that, right? You all have the power to show up in different ways, whether it's stuff that's happening internally in communities of color and holding white people accountable. So, and then I'll use humor because that's fun. Why not?
Yes.
Throw in some laughter,
yes,
right?
I love that you do.
Along the way.
Before I get into the book, this is too good of a question to not ask. Rebecca says, as a white person, how can you politely note when you think a member of management at an employer is essentially viewing a fellow colleague of another race as a token representative of their respected race and culture?
So polite is a privilege, right? And it's making sure someone feels comfortable. That is not where growth happens. So the way to do it that can lead towards growth is the calling in example. It's like, hey, you are stereotyping this person, this role, this group. And that's not okay because this person, this role, this group does this. I'd like to talk to you more about how that's actually a hurtful statement, right? So you're holding them accountable and you're putting it on the spot. And again, and going to a place of action. When people, you can for sure be kind with one another, but be careful with the words like polite, because you're putting that person's comfort before the person who's been harmed. And that doesn't make any sense, right? So if a kid fell off a swing, you don't go over to the swing to say oh my God, swing, are you okay? What do you need? How do we make you better? No, you make sure that the kid is okay. Mm-hmm. And you put the Band-Aid on the kid, and then you can go change the infrastructure, right? Of the swing. So it makes sense, or a softer surface or whatever. And so keep that in mind. That goes back to white comfort.
Before you speak on behalf of somebody else, should you check with that person? and say like, this is what a conversation I was gonna
If
have?
you know, so for example, like if it's an ad agency and they want to market towards women, they may say, well, all Black women are single moms anyway, so I don't think they'll really like this product. We know that that's not the case. Single moms happen in any ethnicity, right? That's out there. So someone in the spot can say like, that's actually not a factual statement. And we know from this brand, X% of Black women really enjoy it. So we should think about what that campaign will be, right? And so there's things where you just have the facts, particularly for those of you who are in different areas of allyship and advocacy, you'll have that information. And so if you're thinking about what Claire said earlier, those little steps every day, those are some little actions that you can take. And it's up to you if you want to say, hey, let's talk about this offline or in the moment. There's variations with that. I'm not going to, there's different factors that are there. But it's, again, you got to take that action and hold them accountable. Mm-hmm. Very quotable.
Yes. Somebody submitted a question. So this is going to be about the book. And I can't wait to talk about this. They said, what did that process, so I heard Dr. Cadet was a diversity editor for the Ladies Get Paid book. What did that process look like? I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for one of your conversations. I have a great example of something you did for me that was a bit game changing, which I can share, but maybe.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Sure. A fantastic thing that Akilah called out was I had said something like, you may have been influenced by your family, your parents or school, in terms of like the expectations that we carry about ourselves and what the kinds of careers we can and cannot have. And Akilah goes, hold on, family and school. Let's think bigger than that, because not everybody has a family or parents, like they maybe haven't been influenced by their parents. Perhaps it's a guardian. I don't know if you made this suggestion, but I remember I added like religious institution. I think community, not just school. Mm-hmm. I never would have thought of that. First of all, and I would never have thought of that in terms of race at all. Like it was so far off my consciousness. The things that I was focused on, how do I not be overtly racist? Mm-hmm. You didn't really think about the nuances, which by the way, if anybody is considering writing a book or knows somebody who's writing or has friends at a publishing house, this is exactly why you need to hire either Akilah or somebody like her, because the nuances are so important. So I don't know if you remember, when you called that out and again, just sort of what the process was like for yourself.
Oh yeah, I totally do. So race is a social construct. It's not a real thing. We only have ethnicity. Race is designed to empower white people, hence white supremacy. It was a result of Bacon's rebellion. That's me being a nerd, but you can look into that and see how race was designed to keep power, white supremacy. So the thing that I love about working with you and being a sensitivity editor in general is the different perspective, right? I don't represent all BIPOC people, but I have expertise in that area. I don't represent all Black people or Black women, but I have expertise in that area. And so there's so many things that happen subconsciously when a book is written, and you will typically come from your own personal lived experience. Mm-hmm. Right? And coming from your own personal lived experience means that there's blinders on other people's experiences that you aren't familiar with, haven't learned about, or taken the time to get into. And so a sensitivity editor is really an accountability partner of making sure if someone like me reads the book, they'll see themselves in it. Someone like you reads the book, they'll see yourself, in it, and making sure that you can have different representation and perspectives. Can I say that I'm in the book?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You can say, we changed your name, but only because of fear of being sued. But you can, it's your life. It's your story.
It's my life. So I'm Giselle in the book. So if you've read that chapter, that's my story, which is really, really great. I'm going to use my story as an example for sensitivity editing. Is that okay?
Yeah, please. Okay.
So it was very interesting to read my story, but there's a clear difference. Not anymore. The book is fantastic. I will tell you that. But early on, when we're looking at the book, like I was saying earlier, anyone who identified as white, their story was so detailed, and you just you knew what they were wearing and what they were experiencing and walking here and then the elevator. And then I had to read my story, and there were gaps. We had a long conversation about that. There were gaps because those descriptors weren't in there. right? And so when we had that discussion, we had a couple of calls, and there's some emails. After that, because the light bulb that went on for you, then the stories changed. So other women of color in the book, more descriptors were in there. You could feel more and you could connect even if you didn't identify like that person. That story of perseverance became very, very clear. And I'm just so proud of you just as a result of that. And you are a wonderful example of not only allyship, but just holding yourself accountable. You know, you told the publishers, you're like, hey, we're going to have a sensitivity editor. I want to make sure this book is representative and everyone can see themselves in it. And I just think I'm just so honored to just be part of this process. And I can't believe you put me in the, I mean, I know Giselle's in the book, but you also put me in the book and I had all these feelings. I was like, oh my God, thank you.
I mean, it was just like, it just illustrated your story. I mean, I'm glad I didn't do it as a favor. Again, like your story was fantastic and illustrated a lot of points. Just want to mention my thought process of something I was worried about doing was the thing that so many other books do, where they kind of, the only reference to women of color is when they put in parentheses, and especially women of color, right? Like, this is difficult for women, especially women of color. And, and that's true, but it feels a little bit like a throwaway. And so, it was trying to figure out, where can I flesh this out more? And it was a really good challenge. Like at first, the challenge was interesting. At first it was a challenge. And then it was like, not at all. Everything that I'm saying, can I do more research about this? Is any of this different for women of color? So not just saying, well, especially for, but there's always more context that you can give. And again, nuance is so, so important. And oftentimes we're just looking at the glaring issues. And Sarah just asked, are there fiction writers asking for sensitivity too? I really made it clear to Simon & Schuster, you need to invest in this, because there's books like American Dirt, I think it was called, which is a whole other story of a woman who wrote the person, from a perspective of a Hispanic, woman from Mexico, and this woman was white or part Puerto Rican, but really is a white person. So, and that's fiction. So I'm putting my foot down. And again, if anybody is in a position where you can advocate for somebody to come in and be a consultant on whatever you're doing, this isn't just about workplace structure. Yeah. So you're looking at the comment there.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the comments. And no, totally. I mean, and then I just want to say, so you can get into your book, you have to understand that the book industry is inherently racist. It's all coming from a white perspective. The difference we're seeing, again, with the books that people are reading is as a result of the murder of George Floyd. But the editor is making sure you're writing to a white person. And so having a sensitivity editor not only is like disruptive for the system, it's that accountability that's going to an industry that has very few BIPOC editors, like very, very few Black editors that are in the space, and also that representation. So anyway, I'm just really proud of you, Claire.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. And it's a continual, you don't do something like this and go, well, I'm good. Well, thank you for being here. Everybody, I would love you all to stay, because I'm going to do a little bit of a reading and then answer questions. Any last thoughts that you want to share, whether they're resources or how to find you and follow you and all that good stuff? I'm sure everybody watching wants to know.
Yeah, you can follow me at Change Cadet. So the word change, and Cadet is my last name. If you need any advice, or you can just pass me on to people. There's a few workshops that are on deck that will be coming, they're posted now and will be coming on deck for encouraging people to go or attending yourself. There's a lot of exciting things going on for Black History Month. So if you're looking for ways to learn and amplify, stay tuned with my page. And I'll hang out, because I love you, so I'll still be here. I'll respond to some of the questions in chat too. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you. And if folks need to leave, I will not be offended, but those who stay, I will love you forever. So I'll begin my reading now, and it's how it all began. So this is a story of how the book started, how the organization started, and what I hope the book can do. Before Ladies Get Paid, the book, came Ladies Get Paid, the organization. It was born from 3 pivotal moments in my life. The first happened at an advertising festival. Party after party, CEOs of major brands socialized and drank with those who wanted their business. It was mostly men. At the time, I worked for a professional platform that connected creatives with jobs, and I was there to find clients. The festival opened with an outdoor cocktail party. Whose wife are you? He was tall, probably around 60 years old, dressed in an expensive-looking white linen suit. It had been barely 5 minutes since I'd walked into the party. I gritted my teeth and stretched my lips into what I hoped was a smile. I'm here on business. This was going to be a long week. Around-the-clock networking is tiring. And it was, but what was even more exhausting was the invisible, though sometimes obvious, imbalance of power between genders. Men greatly outnumbered women, and their seniority dwarfed ours. I needed these men to send me their business, but so many saw me, and many of the other women there, not as valuable professional connections, but as people to party with. Repeatedly, I had to wrestle the conversation back to a place that was relevant to my work, or simply back to a place where I felt comfortable. It was draining, but I'd done this dance before. In fact, I'd been doing it my entire career. Something profound happened toward the end of the festival. Needing to pee and needing a break, I sought refuge in the women's restroom. It turned out I wasn't the only one. Crowded in there were women of all ages, huddled together, connecting and commiserating. They traded business cards and tips on who to avoid and who was actually serious about networking. These women had come to the festival to get shit done. It just happened to be getting done in the ladies' room. I spent some time there recharging, then took a deep breath and went back out into the fray. After the week was over, I slept for 2 days straight. I felt demoralized and a bit disgusted as I replayed each unsettling interaction over and over again, from Mr. Whose wife are you to the guy who slurred, "You're hot," when I pitched him a business idea. Then my disgust turned inward. What had I done to attract this kind of attention? Was my dress too short? Had I been too friendly? This was an all too familiar loop, a constant refrain throughout my whole career, and maybe even my whole life. But for the first time, something short-circuited my self-doubt. For years, I'd struggled to be taken seriously as a successful, ambitious woman, questioning myself in the process. This is a crazy story. One memory stood out in particular. I was at dinner with a man a colleague had introduced me to, thinking we might partner on a project. Toward the end of the evening, he grabbed my hand and pulled me in to kiss him. I snatched my arm back. "Excuse me," I said in disbelief. The man looked utterly confused. "But you gave me your business card," he sputtered. Besides the fact that it was a troubling misinterpretation of signals, what stayed with me was the fact that I was being perceived as a potential sexual partner instead of a professional one, despite every indication that I was there to do business. And as a result, networking with this person, who otherwise could have been valuable for my work, was an opportunity I would not pursue. And it also made me feel like shit. I'm going to tell you guys a story that was not in this book. Do you want to know what I said in response to him when he said, "But you gave me your business card"? I'm so proud of myself. I said to him, "We're in the same industry. I would have been a fool not to have given you my business card." I didn't put that in the book. So thank you all for being here so I could tell you the end part of that. I had a realization. How many other times had I missed opportunities, not because of a lack of ability or performance, but because I was a woman? How many hours had I wasted agonizing about how to maneuver among men like these in this world that they had created? I thought of all the energy I'd wasted seeking approval from the men around me. I couldn't continue like this. Something had to change. I opened my laptop and I Googled 3 words: women, work, and inequality. What I learned shook me to my core. The majority of today's college graduates are women, yet less than 22% of us make it past middle management. The wage gap, which is usually referred to as being 78 to 80 cents to the man's dollar, is not the reality for everyone. Depending on your race and a myriad of other factors, it can be so much worse. Black women make between 63 and 68 cents on the dollar, while Hispanic women make a mere 55 cents on the dollar. I was shocked. I felt angry. And on top of that, I was ashamed for not knowing it was that bad. And that reeked of my privilege. I'd grown up being told I could do and be whatever I dreamed of, that our workplaces are meritocracy, and that the fight for equality was over and won by my mother's generation. I was finally understanding this was not a reality, and I wanted to do something about it. As I continued to research women in the workplace, I discovered an entire vocabulary that put words to things I'd always felt, but hadn't known how to articulate. For example, I learned about emotional labor, the contortionism that women, especially women of color, perform to fit into and accommodate environments where they are not the status quo. All of this was enlightening, but it was also overwhelming. With such systemic entrenched bias, what could I as an individual possibly do? A year later, I was approached by an art director friend of mine, Lita. She'd recently found out that a male art director friend of hers was charging almost double what she was. This discovery made Lita realize how little she knew about pricing and how important it was for this to be a larger, more open conversation with our peers. She was also concerned that the lack of transparency might mean other people were underpricing themselves, which in turn could be bringing down wages for everyone. Because I was the director of marketing for a platform that helped people find work, I was in a position to bring information and awareness to a large network of people. Lita wondered if there was something I could do to help women learn what they should be paid. It began to dawn on me that in so many ways, money symbolized much of what I'd been agonizing over in the past year. Money, and having the same opportunities to earn just as much as men, was about more than a number. It represented value, worth, and above all, power. All things that as women, we have historically been denied. The conversation with Lita happened during the lead up to the 2016 presidential election. As I thought about organizing an event for women to talk about money, I became intrigued by the town halls the candidates were hosting, and I thought it could be a good alternative in lieu of the format of a typical panel. I envisioned one made up of women of different backgrounds and professions, trading stories and advice about money in an open forum, essentially democratizing a subject that had always seemed to be in the domain of experts, men. More important, it could finally get us talking about a topic that was taboo, that was considered crass, but that men seemed able to navigate with ease. Maybe if one of us spoke up, others would follow. All we needed was a bit of encouragement. To get people to sign up, I asked 6 women I admired if they would be open to sharing their money stories. I also asked each of them to recommend a few women they thought should be there. For every woman I was introduced to, I asked if they could recommend another woman who might want to attend. This went on until we reached capacity. The day of the event, 100 women came. They crowded together on couches, spilling out onto the floor, passing around bottles of wine, buzzing with energy. It reminded me of the ladies' room at the advertising festival. It was not just wine, it was also lots of tequila because it was Cinco de Mayo. That part's not in the book, okay. It was my first public speaking experience, and I knew I didn't have all of the answers. I was there to learn just as much as they were. I told the room that we would get out of the event only as much as we were willing to give. To receive help meant we had to offer it. We raised our glasses to one another and we began. It was like a cork shooting out of a champagne bottle. One story begat another as these women opened up to one another and to themselves. They shared stories of disappointments and struggles, missed opportunities, denied promotions. There were lots of tears, but lots of high fives too. One woman stood up and declared, "I'm an illustrator and I make a shit ton of money." She got a standing ovation. I was right. This conversation was about so much more than the dollars in our pockets. It was about solidarity. It was about self-worth. It was also about taking action to right the wrongs that we'd been laboring under. We could no longer wait and hope to be rewarded. Money was the first step, a tangible thing that could mark progress on what was sure to be a long road ahead. To close the gap, we would start with ourselves by advocating for our worth. But for all of us to rise, we needed to work together. 3 hours later, the event was technically over, but no one was leaving. I was becoming antsy since the venue was charging me by the hour. "Go home," I shouted as I turned off the lights. Everyone reluctantly shuffled out, and I could hear them discussing what bar to go to. They didn't want the conversation to end. As one of the women walked out, she pulled me aside. "This," she said, motioning around the room, "you should do this." I didn't know what she meant, but something magical had happened that night. On my way home, I felt electric. That energy in the room was coursing through my veins, and my mind was racing. It had been over a year since I'd Googled workplace inequality, and I thought that maybe, just maybe, this could be the start of something big, something that could lead toward making things right. While I didn't quite know what that was, perhaps the first step was simply for us to share our stories as we had done that night. I'm almost done with this. Over the course of the next 12 months, I organized 250 town halls in 19 cities, bringing together thousands of women to talk about money, power, work, and self-worth. And every time a woman got up to speak, she discovered she was not alone. As I watched them, I knew there had to be a way to harness the strength we have when we come together. I wanted to see it move beyond those rooms and those town halls, to build an even larger collective that could allow us to learn from one another, encourage one another, and share practical advice and professional guidance to get us where we wanted to be. The town halls were our catharsis, but with no action afterward, all that inspiration and energy would be wasted, and nothing would change. While organizing these events, I witnessed the power in peer-to-peer sharing, but I also saw there was a great need for concrete tools to fix actual problems. One topic that kept coming up in the town halls all across the country was insecurity surrounding salary negotiation. Teaching more women how to negotiate their salaries wasn't a big picture structural change, but it could at least start moving the needle in the short term. As I fit the pieces together, I knew there was something special happening, but what I didn't know was that a movement was being born. This one area of actionable change became the cornerstone of our movement and a springboard for accessing and improving broader issues impacting women in the workplace. As of this writing, the Ladies Get Paid community has grown to more than 100,000 women who are all working together to advance women in the workplace. In this book, I will share the stories of 9 members, some identifying details and names have been changed. Giselle, for example. Each in their own way, these women battle internal and external struggles, pushing up against the bounds of what they and others expect of themselves, and are ultimately able to reach places of purpose, fulfillment, and power. For many of them, this meant undoing assumptions and rebuilding expectations, examining where they came from and becoming clear on what direction they will go. In their stories, I will highlight what they can teach us. In those moments, I hope you will reflect on your own life and how you'll use these tools to rocket yourself forward. This book is organized into 4 parts. The first part explores the obstacles we may have in ourselves. We'll examine expectations we may have been inherited from our families, the media, our communities, and other influences about what career success looks like and what we can achieve. From there, we'll learn to identify and evaluate opportunities to make sure we are headed on a path that's aligned with our values and goals. Then we'll break down imposter syndrome and perfectionism, 2 major internal roadblocks, often resulting from systemic and cultural obstacles that stand in our way of feeling and doing our best. In the second part of the book, we'll broaden our focus. Now I'm almost done. You'll learn how to build and leverage your network to get you where you want to go. This includes interviewing, securing, and negotiating for a new job. But getting the job is only the first step. You need to also set yourself up for success. That means educating yourself on how to develop healthy work habits for the long game. Things like conducting an inventory of your energy and setting boundaries for yourself and others so that you don't burn out. You can't do well if you aren't well. Then we'll explore how to navigate upward, cultivating a support system, increasing our visibility, and taking advantage of opportunities. The ultimate goal? To seek out rewarding challenges and do our best work in a place that recognizes and rewards us. At a certain point, however, trying to do well in a system that was not made by or for us is not good enough. The system itself has to change. The final part of the book is about what we can do to make our workplaces more inclusive and supportive of women, including policies and practices companies can implement to make that happen. But for true systemic change to happen, we need updated and evolved laws. The appendix includes information on how to lobby your elected officials to enact laws that ensure wide-ranging and long-lasting progress. And if you guys get the paperback, it'll be even more updated than that one. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that some of the lessons in this book come from a place of relative privilege. Being able to walk away from a negotiation or turn down a job are luxuries. And while as women, we are bound together by our marginalized status, my experience in the workplace as a white cisgender woman is not the same as that of a Black woman, or a Hispanic woman, or a woman with a disability, or a trans woman, or any of the countless women in groups pushed to the fringes of society who have been fighting these battles for generations. I firmly believe that we have progressed only as far as those who still struggle the most among us. If we're going to make meaningful change, it has to benefit all of us, not just some of us, and we have to do it together. Let's get started. And by started, I mean, let's wrap up this event. I'll take any questions that you have. I know we're at time, but happy to stick around. No pressure for Akilah to stay. She's been very generous with her time, although I'm grateful for you to.
I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere.
See, I'm doing the female thing where I'm like, oh, thank you so much for being here. I'm so sorry I've gone over. Like, no, I'm proud of the work that we did. I really believe in the book, and not just because I wrote it. And by the way, it's available everywhere, but I really encourage you all, please support our host, Anderson Books. Let me just make sure I have the correct information, the link for you. They're the ones who, help facilitate today, and you'll be, supporting an independent bookstore. And I signed that book. So I'll go ahead and put that link in just a minute. The other thing I want to mention is that Comcast, NBC Universal, they have been great allies. They have partnered with us on a number of things, including today, and they're allowing me to be paid as I do this, which is very important, as you know.
Comcast, NBC Universal is great. I was on there. I moderated the panel.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yes.
For Ladies Get Paid. Is that what we did with Comcast?
Oh, yes. At the conference.
Yep.
The conference. They've been really great. So everybody in the chat, I just put in the link to Anderson's Bookshop. I'll send you all a follow-up email with our YouTube channel, because that's where this recording will go, along with that link. And if there's no other questions, just a big thank you.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, please.
This is what people don't get to hear. I've been waiting to be part of your book tour. What was the first thing you did after you received the rough draft? Like, you had the draft of the book. What did you do?
Probably try to edit it all over again. Like, I was editing it when it was at the printer. I was like, seriously, guys. And I just want to tell everybody makes mistakes. There were things that my editor didn't catch, like the word "and" twice in a sentence, so my dad was kind of joking, as long as your name's spelled correctly on the cover, like, you're fine. So, is that what I did after? Were you thinking of something else?
No, I was just curious. And then how did you celebrate yourself? Because it's hard to stop my book process will probably start sometime this year. It's hard to stop, right? But like you're talking about that feeling of perfectionism, which you do talk about in the book. But how did you stop and say, like, you know what, I did it, I'm proud of myself?
Because Ashley made me do that at
some
point.
Yeah.
At some point, and I talk about this in the book with the story that I tell, which again, I wrote this for all of you, but, really wrote it for myself. I was learning the lessons as I wrote them. And I did this exercise with her, which I do for myself, which is, what is the consequence here for you and for other people when you have perfectionism or when you have massive anxiety? And it was affecting my relationship, where she's like, this is actively hurting me as you continue to stress about this book and work on it. So, I kind of had to do it for her, because I could have kept going. And I did get to edit more that's going to be in the paperback, but now I'm done. So I've had a little bit of trouble celebrating this, because it's been remote. I had a little book party with my family, but it doesn't feel real because I can't hug people. I can't have a big launch party. So I'm still trying to figure it out. And also, even seeing the book at Barnes & Noble, I felt numb. I wish more people would talk about this. When you see this great success, sometimes the first reaction is to disassociate and go, well, is that me? Did I really do that? I did do it, and it was fucking hard. It took 2 years, and I feel really good now, but I appreciate you asking that, because it is hard sometimes to do that. Yeah. By the way, for everybody else, tonight, the next event, it's going to be 6 p.m. Eastern time. It's a webinar about how to be your own publicist. I'm going to put that link. And the next book tour event is going to be this Thursday at 6 p.m. With an amazing woman. And if you don't know her, Akilah, I would love to introduce you. 6:30 on Thursday. It's a woman named Soraya Shamali, and she's the executive director of the Representation Project, and also the author of Rage Becomes Her. And she's a woman of color. So talking about when women feel anger and how they express in society, sort of what happens.
When I become a badass bitch and people have a hard time with that.
But also, yeah, and also trying to figure out your own rage, right? Like, am I allowed to feel this? And if I do, how do I express it?
Right.
So I hope that you all can come to that, and it is free. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you sticking around. Good 46 people of you still want to procrastinate during your day. So let's all go back to work. And I just thank you again, Akilah. Thank you all for being here. Much love. And we'll send you a link to the recording, and I hope to see you at another book event.
Thank you. Very proud of you, Claire.
Thank you. Proud of you. Bye, guys.